And we're back, like we never left. Wasn't expecting to do a second episode today, this evening, but the passing of James Earl Jones, something that needs to be commemorated, and he needs to be remembered for all time, but especially today. And as you can see, I've moved my Star Wars poster from over there. Some of you probably didn't even know I had a Star Wars poster because of the way I squeezed the image, try to make it more personal. But for this, I wanted you to know for 100% certain that I am a Star Wars fan, and without ever having to be physically present for any Star Wars IP that he was directly involved in. This poster is perfect because Darth Vader is the single character who casts the greatest shadow of them all, of any character in the history of Star Wars. And one of the ironies, James Earl Jones was already a very successful stage and screen and television actor. He won 3 Emmy Awards for his TV work. He won a Golden Globe Award, and he was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor for a movie called The Great White Hope. But Star Wars, there was no master plan. It's not like George Lucas, who was, maybe he was in his early 30s at the time, had some grand design that he was going to cast the British bodybuilder who, for reference, he's in A Clockwork Orange. He plays the kind of manservant of the homeowner that Alex DeLarge assaults, to say the least. But it was David Prowse in the suit. David Prowse also trained Christopher Reeve for the original Superman. So he was a guy that was all over the place, but we didn't see him in human form that often. We saw him in human form in A Clockwork Orange. But in Star Wars Episode 4 and 5 and 6, I don't know about the others, it's David Prowse who is a big dude in the suit. And David Prowse read the lines. He read Darth Vader's lines in his very proper British accent and cadence. And as far as he knew, there wasn't going to be an additional voice. It was him. But George Lucas is nothing if not creative. And he made a decision. I don't know if he knew all along or did he make a decision in post, but at a certain point in time, James Earl Jones was asked to come in and record the dialogue for Darth Vader. And I assume Lucas knew that it would work, but I can't imagine, as much as George Lucas is a creative visionary and one of the most important figures to work in cinema in the 20th century into the 21st century, I don't know that he automatically said, oh my God, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. Oh my God. But he had to have been excited at the possibility. And Harrison Ford joked about how some of the lines of dialogue for Han Solo, for Luke, for Leia, you can write this shit, George, but you can't say it. Vader's dialogue is a level above. But the reality is James Earl Jones could have made reading the phone book interesting. And he did a lot of voiceover work that I got a kick out of. He was the voice of CNN for, I think, at least 2 decades. You would be watching, TV. I used to watch Sports Tonight. That was their nightly sports recap when such programs as that were important if you followed sports. And you'd watch whether it was Fred Hickman, Nick Charles, Van Earl Wright, some of the different hosts that they had over the years. And I'm talking circa early 1990s. They would go to commercial and you would see the logo and the iconic baritone of James Earl Jones saying the words, "This is CNN." It could be no one else but him. There are certain people where you know them by voice. And it is, I don't want to say unfortunate, it's more that it's ironic that he is best known the voice of Darth Vader, the voice of Mufasa in The Lion King, of course. But he was a really good actor. He didn't luck into those Emmy Awards. He was adept at comedy. He was adept at drama. And The Great White Hope is a movie that was adapted from a stage play about Jack Johnson, who was a very polarizing figure. And there are those that to this day will say that he was a top 10 greatest heavyweight ever. He didn't have the advanced kind of training techniques and tactics that fighters as early as the 30s. The training went quantum leaps forward from the teens and 20s when Jack Johnson was in his prime. And Jack Johnson was a notorious figure. He was a man of color who dated and married white women, and he was constantly getting into trouble, constantly breaking the law. Give me a fucking break. We all know what his crime was. We don't need to put too fine a point on it. But James Earl Jones' portrayal of Jack Johnson captured the spirit of the man. And this is a movie that's now 54 years old. It's from 1970, the year that George C. Scott won for Patton, I believe, for Best Actor. But he didn't simply play a historical figure. People in the know and people who were aware of Johnson said that he got the spirit of Jack Johnson right. Jack Johnson was a guy who smiled a lot. Even in the ring, even as he was pounding his opponents senseless. He was a guy who loved to smile and loved to laugh. Sometimes because something was funny, but it was just his way. And the kind of sneering, snarling aspect of Jack Johnson, James Earl Jones captured it perfectly. And there were some that felt he could have easily picked up the Best Actor Oscar. He could have won the award as opposed to just being nominated. Now, in the same vein, 6-7 years later, James Earl Jones played Malcolm X in the movie called The Greatest, which is the not very good, and it kills me to say that. It's not that good. It's a biopic based on Muhammad Ali's autobiography. It's just okay. They got an incredible cast together from Ernest Borgnine on down, and Ali plays himself. He wasn't really that good of an actor. He was just okay. But James Earl Jones played Malcolm X in that movie, and then it was kind of, not that it was funny, but that he took part in that film because there were certain parallels to the life of Jack Johnson and Muhammad Ali, that they were notorious figures in certain circles, that they were public enemy number one vis-a-vis the United States government. And that's probably why James Earl Jones decided to play Malcolm X. It's not that big of a role. Mario Van Peebles in the Ali film, The Michael Mann, starring Will Smith, has a much more important role. I don't think that James Earl Jones is in more than 2 scenes in the movie The Greatest. But he brought a certain gravitas to every role. And yes, part of it was the voice. But in my estimation, just as a younger person, when he showed up on screen, the movie meant business. I would agree with anyone who said that. When I saw Man of Steel 10 years ago, didn't love it. Love Henry Cavill. He's great in almost everything he does. Didn't love the movie. But Kevin Costner as Pa Kent, he has gravitas. Even the 10, 11 years ago version of Kevin Costner, he has a certain screen presence. Russell Crowe has a certain screen presence, a gravitas. And if you watch a movie such as The Hunt for Red October, which was the first of the Jack Ryan, Tom Clancy adaptations, James Earl Jones plays, I think, a Navy admiral, but he's pretty high up, and he seems to be involved in the decision-making at the highest levels of the United States government. Every line reading by James Earl Jones, we're not saying, oh my God, it's Darth Vader, but the facial gestures and every inflection, it feels like his character is more important than he actually is because it's James Earl Jones. And many people remember him, of course, in Coming to America, which showed just how funny he could be, playing Eddie Murphy's father, the King of Zamunda, and his kind of humorous moments with John Amos, who is absolutely hysterical as McDowell, the guy who basically owns a McDonald's but calls it McDowell's because that's his name, all kinds of copyright infringement. I don't think that movie is entirely successful. It's certainly a great showcase for Eddie Murphy, just doing Eddie Murphy things and being an absolute comic genius. But James Earl Jones, in a similar vein, he brings the heat, he brings the weight and the gravitas and the sense that this is a movie that we have to take seriously because look who's in it. He commanded respect and commanded attention. And there are certain actors that when we think of, and there are movies that have like famous cameos, and we say, who could we get to play this kind of part? And for example, in 1994, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was already in his mid-40s, had already been a huge star for a decade. But he was an older actor, and he was still a big guy. Arnold was still walking around at 220 at single digits body fat at that point. The guy looked ridiculous. So he played Arnold, a guy who was pretty high up in, it's a CIA kind of organization called Omega Sector. And his boss in the script is constantly dressing him down, barking at him, and making Arnold feel like less than his best self. He's being very insulting. So James Cameron, it's a legitimate question. We need an actor. It's not a big role, but we need an actor that can believably dress down Arnold Schwarzenegger. Who should we get? Well, in the world of True Lies, James Cameron got Charlton Heston. And Heston is a scream. He had a certain gravitas. Hey, this is Moses. This is the guy with the 10 Commandments. This is the guy who shouted Ramses, "Let my people go, asshole." So in a movie that I discussed today, either fortunately or unfortunately, or it doesn't really matter, but I didn't mention James Earl Jones's cameo. The movie Sneakers, starring Robert Redford, Dan Aykroyd, Mary McDonnell, David Strathairn, Sidney Poitier, River Phoenix, and Sir Ben Kingsley. James Earl Jones shows up literally with 5 minutes left in the film. And I can imagine the filmmaker who had also worked with James Earl Jones, Phil Alden Robinson, in Field of Dreams, one of his most famous dramatic roles for sure. Also with Kevin Costner, speaking of gravitas, as I keep using that word, but it's a great word and it's so fitting for this amazing thespian. But Phil Alden Robinson, when he was preparing and he had to cast together, you ask yourself a question. We need a big actor, a big personality, maybe an intimidating personality, but we're going to have fun with that part of it. We need someone to show up at the end of the movie and believably hold his own with Robert Redford, with Sidney Poitier. Well, who do we get? They got James Earl Jones. And so he begins this, I'm not going to spoil it, as I didn't spoil the movie earlier today. We get him coming in to pick up a very particular black box, the MacGuffin of the movie. And he starts out by making threats. And we think, okay, this is going to be the scene. He's kind of a shady, scary CIA, FBI kind of guy here. But Robert Redford's team, they're the ones that have the hardware. You don't just get to threaten us and we're going to buckle on you. We have what you want. How about we make a deal? And James Earl Jones, I think, ad-libbed. He has some really funny lines where he basically says, what do you think, I'm some kind of deal maker? I'm a traveling salesman? I'm not giving you a Winnebago. Okay, I still want a Winnebago or you ain't getting this. I want an all-expense-paid trip for my wife and I to Europe and the fanciest hotel. The way the scene turns is gold. And James Earl Jones could have phoned it in, but he comes across like, this is really the guy. This is not a famous, legendary actor already showing up for a couple of minutes to pick up a paycheck because he's doing a favor for a friend. he comes in there and we get a sense that this guy has lived, this guy has seen some shit, and he ain't going to put up with their shit, except he is pretty much over a barrel. He has to get this MacGuffin back, this black box, and he clearly has been told, you can give him the bluster, and if it doesn't work, give the sons of bitches whatever the fuck they want. We just have to get this thing back. It is a great, under the radar, very brief but memorable James Earl Jones performance in a fantastic movie, crime comedy caper, Sneakers. Now, before I forget, I want to point out, some of you know this, if you're a cineast such as myself, you certainly know this, but for those who don't, James Earl Jones's father was an actor, and a quite successful one at that, Robert Earl Jones. Now, I just mentioned Robert Redford, and a couple of days ago, I discussed on my great movie series, the film The Sting, which is famously stars Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid themselves, Paul Newman and Robert Redford. But the thing that could be a little bit lost to history, because it's not the first thing that we think of if we're familiar with the movie The Sting. Robert Redford's partner at the beginning of the movie is played by James Earl Jones's dad, Robert. And needless to say, they look an awful lot alike. But another thing that I didn't know about Robert Earl Jones is that he lived to 96. He passed in 2006. He was born in 1910. And that is, I wouldn't even call that trivia, but that's just amazing. So James Earl Jones made it to 93, passing this morning, and his father made it to 96. That is just incredible. Now, I'm someone who didn't see The Lion King when it first came out. It was many, many years later that I finally saw it. But yes, the voice acting from James Earl Jones is incredible. And it helps to elevate the movie more than if they had cast just anyone. And this is where sometimes a person winning an Oscar opens doors. You would think that you would have to have the doors open to get an Oscar-winning role in the first place. But my perception of this is Jeremy Irons as Scar, him winning the Oscar three years or two to 3 years before doing the voice work. I don't know if he and James Earl Jones did any of the recordings around the same time. I don't know the mechanics of it. But Jeremy Irons, my namesake, he won Oscar for Reversal of Fortune. He collected his Oscar in, March of 1991, the year of Goodfellas and Dances with Wolves. I believe that him winning that Oscar elevated his profile even more. And I think that's how he got the role of Scar. When you talk about voice acting, two guys who have great speaking voices, but going the extra mile, James Earl Jones as Mufasa and Jeremy Irons as Scar. Even if people watching the movie didn't know that it was Jeremy Irons, I would, just because I had read about it. It's more than the sum of its parts. Both of those roles are more than what is on the page because of the geniuses behind a microphone, selling it, making it believable, making it feel real, even in the context of an animated movie. They didn't even have to make that good of a movie and people were going to see it, but they did. They took the time and they got all the right people for all the right roles. I didn't love Rogue One, even though Vader has that incredible moment where he's just slicing and dicing. I didn't love Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I know I'm supposed to because it dovetails into Episode 4. I've only seen Episode 3 straight through once in theaters, and I was underwhelmed. As I had been underwhelmed by Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, I actually think that The Phantom Menace is the best of the prequel trilogy, even though there's all that nonsense with the blockade and the Trade Federation, the Viceroy, all of that crap doesn't work. Oh, and Jar Jar Binks. But there is so much in that movie that I adore. And there are moments, there are action sequences that are so fluid, they remind me of the the kind of storytelling style of the original trilogy. So yeah, the prequel trilogy, the one with James Earl Jones, I think it's better than Attack of the Clones. I think Attack of the Clones is the worst out of the 9. That's a hill I'll go down on. I don't hate the sequel trilogy, 7, 8, 9. I think the actors are all terrific. I really like John Boyega. I think Daisy Ridley was an incredible casting choice. They're not great, but I think Mark Hamill in episode 8, he really absolutely killed it. I thought he was fantastic, and I didn't even know that he still had it in him to do that, and he did it. And obviously Adam Driver, home run hitter. He's amazing. Even though his character was not written that well, and he's talked about the fact that the through line seemed to change as they were making the sequel trilogy. James Earl Jones, there are so many different movies that we can point to. Even a film like The Sandlot, where he's kind of, I don't know if we're supposed to say, is this the guy from Field of Dreams or anything, but the prior identification with one of the most famous baseball movies helps to sell The Sandlot. He's somebody, as soon as he's on screen, you sit up and you take notice. And it was a number of years ago, I want to say that James Earl Jones, he appeared, I don't know if it was a lecture, it wasn't a book signing, but my sister had an opportunity to meet him. I think it was 2005 at SUNY New Paltz. I'm not 100% on the year, but I'm pretty sure that it was up there at New Paltz. And I guess you can't really get past the voice. If you're fortunate enough to have met him in person, it's probably still intimidating. But you see so many pictures of him, always ready with a smile, and he had an amazing smile. And it's such a cliche, and I apologize in advance. But to say that a great voice has been silenced, it's true in every sense of that phrase. He had an incredible career on TV, in the movies, and on stage. I mean, Broadway, he was consistently working on Broadway. He did a play not that long ago, within the last decade for sure, with Cicely Tyson. I don't remember, not with Cicely Tyson, I'm sorry. But he did a play within the last 10 years on Broadway, maybe even the last 5. He continued to work. He didn't want to just retire. Not that there's anything wrong with retiring. There's nothing wrong with doing what Sean Connery did at 72, double middle finger salute, never came back. You know, and there's a part of me that hopes that Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't come back. As much as the Spielbergs and Scorseses have made consistent entreaties, it's okay if he stays retired. If Quentin Tarantino wants to retire after making his 10th film, it's on him. It's okay. We can't always be selfish and say, oh, I hope they keep working. Yeah, I hope they keep working. But they're also allowed to do what they want. And James Earl Jones loved the craft of acting. 93, James Earl Jones. Gone, but never will he be forgotten. This has been episode 298 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday evening with me here in New York. Sorry for the somber episode, but it's unfortunately part of life is dealing with the passing of people that we greatly admire and look up to. But if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or any of the other platforms in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.